I walk into some folks and they say, we just had a wear test done. And I said, okay, quick question. Were your guys allowed to wear their cotton t-shirts underneath? Oh, yeah. We didn't do it. Well, guess what you just wear tested? You just wear tested your cotton t-shirt underneath because that's what's close to your skin. People have to really purposely build a wear test so they can get some good feedback on how did it feel? Did you get good moisture management? Did you feel that the garment was helping you? Do you have confidence that the garment will protect you?
Welcome to the Electrical Safety Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Travis, and we got Derek Singh back with us again. Derek, thanks for coming on the show a second time.
Well, thank you so much, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, no, it's good to chat again. First time around, we had a lot of people, excited to hear what you had to say and kind of asking questions and things like that. So I just thought we'd pick up the conversation and keep going. So, I guess kind of, I'm not sure we get into it much last time or not, but one thing I was curious on your take is just the kind of evolution of FR and AR clothing and the technology, how it's changed over the years. I still think a lot of people don't, they're still picturing kind of the stuff that you started, that you would have seen 15 years ago. So could you kind of walk us through how the arc flash clothing has evolved over the years?
Absolutely. And, you're echoing a great point because some folks still, believe it or not, are utilizing what we would consider like 1990s technology. The analogy I always make is, you're bringing a bag phone to an Apple phone. So where'd we go? Really back when I started, you had basically 5 fabrics to utilize. We had the Endura FR cotton, Endura Ultra Soft, the 8812 kickoff, Nomex, Kermel, and PBI Kevlar. And that was pretty much it. And you were, as a manufacturer, kind of, beholden to one of those 5 choices. And you had your Nomex houses, you had your FR cotton houses, and then you had some specialty items with those other fabrics in between. Fast forward from, 1985, fast forward to 2000. 2000 is really when we first started seeing the blends. And by blends, I mean primarily FR monoacrylics. So you have a modified acrylic fiber, which everybody understands is basically a synthetic. The cool thing is when it's still a soup, if I take a bunch of fire retardant chemistry and I dump it into the soup, I can now extrude a fiber that has FR properties. The downside with monoacrylics, relatively weak, so we have to give them a lot of supporting fibers for strength. If we give them too much aramid, then they're too uncomfortable over time. So now where do we get to? We're blending, and this is where the marketplace is kind of tweaking things. You're blending typically a cellulosic, whether that's cotton or whether that's lyocell or rayon, for comfort and moisture management. The more of those fibers you have, the more moisture I can pull from my body. Then you're using your aramids and your para-aramids, basically those strong Nomex style type fibers, to provide strength and additional FR protection to the monoacrylic. So depending on how you tweak that formula, you can get really lightweight. So the core thing is we always want to get, and electricians will relate to this, you want to have that 8 cal minimal protection, or what 70E and Z462 call Cat 2, or have been calling Cat 2. That's the magic. Well, some of that's dependent on weight, some of that's dependent on fiber content. And the way we're tweaking the fibers now across almost all manufacturers, everybody's got one fabric that we call sub 6. Less than 6 ounces of protection. So we're at 5.5, 5.3, 5.8 ounces of protection. Put that into comparison when you had the 8812 in 1990, which was the workhorse of the onset of the 70E Z462 compliance, the utility compliance in 2014. Those FR cottons, their punch-out weight was 7.5 ounces. We've now removed almost 2 ounces of fabric weight. So you've got lighter weight fibers doing the work of much heavier fibers 20 years ago. So where that puts us to, which is nice, is at retail weight. You walk into any of your stores, you're going to find work shirts that are 5.2 ounces of whatever. So you're at retail weight. So we've kind of removed that whole premise of hot, heavy, and uncomfortable. Because the science behind these new fibers is they've actually been able to mimic a lot of your performance fabrics by being able to combine hydrophilic and hydrophobic. That's a fancy way of saying pulling and pushing. So I push moisture and I pull moisture, get it out to the environment. I'm cooler. I'm lightweight. I dry faster. So all of those things that happen in our retail performance world, we're able to mimic to a certain degree now in the FR world. So we've really got a performance garment that people want to wear as opposed to have to wear. So that drives what? That drives more compliance. And the one thing you'll notice I haven't said much about below the waist, because believe it or not, we don't get much pushback from below the waist. Why? Everybody's grown up wearing 12 and 14 ounce denim since they were toddlers. They don't even notice the fabric weight that, yeah, it would be nice to have this, but we don't get pushback. It's typically from the waist up. So the cool thing is, and what I would suggest to anybody listening, if you haven't had a wear test done by a reputable manufacturer supplier in the last couple years, get some new stuff on your people's backs. It'll be a world of different.
Would you call it a wear test?
Wear test, yep. And make sure it's a qualified wear test with someone who knows what they're doing, because it's kind of humorous. I walk into some folks and they say, we just had a wear test done. And I said, okay, quick question. Were your guys allowed to wear their cotton t-shirts underneath? Oh, yeah. We didn't do it. Well, guess what you just wear tested? You just wear tested your cotton t-shirt underneath, because that's what's close to your skin. That's what you're feeling, and that's what you're evaluating. So that's just one example of where people have to really purposely build a wear test so they can get some good feedback on how did it feel? Did you get good moisture management? Did you feel that the garment was helping you? Do you have confidence that the garment will protect you? And a whole bunch of other questions that need to be in that. You run it for about 3 to 4 weeks, and then you sit down and make an evaluation. And 9 times out of 10, if you've done it right, your people will have great buy-in, and more likely they'll have something that was built in 2020 as opposed to something that was built in 1990.
Yeah. So are people still, like, maybe they bought it a long time ago and they just haven't replaced it, but are people like replacing their old stuff with more old stuff because that's what they're used to buying? Is that happening?
Twofold. One, you've got, depending on your supply chain and where you're procuring stuff, there's certain folks in certain service segments that want to keep you in the same stuff because it's more profitable. There are other segments now that are evolving to where their catalog offerings are broader and you're able to get anything. The downside is if you've never tried it, you and I know, just when you make normal everyday consumer decisions and you walk down the aisle and you see something flashing as new, do you ever hesitate and just buy what you're comfortable with? We do it all the time. Yeah. So unless you're actually proactively asking to get the latest and greatest, most distribution channels are very, very comfortable you just buying the same old. It's easy for them. It's already been worked through. It makes things simple. They don't have a lot of new things to figure out, and everybody just goes along. So I would encourage you as the wearer, at the end of the day, it's up to you to ask for the latest and greatest. That's the only way to drive it.
And then you also got me thinking about, I know there's a lot of myths, let's say, out there about the clothing, but do you think there's any that, or maybe, I'm sure there are, ones that would have been true, like you mentioned, it's too hot, it's too heavy, that kind of stuff. But is there anything else that now that there's new technology, those myths have gone away, or maybe there's new myths that are hanging around that just don't exist anymore because the technology's changed in the clothing? Like,
sure. Well, the most common ones you kind of hit on: hot, heavy, and uncomfortable. Doesn't have to be anymore. The biggest one we always get, though, is this stuff will wear out. When does it wear out? What's the wear out date? And it's tough to make a blanket statement, but my blanket statement will, all the products that are purchased and kind of sourced that have North American roots. And I say North American roots because you can still be a North American company and you may cut and sew in another place, but you have done all the homework to ensure that those fabrics are going to be compliant. And there's nothing really sketchy. So if you are looking at those types of supply chains. At the end of the day, hot and heavy's gone away. Will this stuff last? Every reputable manufacturer, they will last for the life of that garment. And that sounds a little quirky. It almost sounds a little salesy, life of the garment. Well, we really do mean the life of the garment, because every garment, regardless of weight, fiber technology, has a useful life. And by useful life is we do want you evaluating whether it has rips, tears, frays, thread burn. We want you to upgrade it. So once that useful life's over, the FR properties we don't worry about. So we want to be guaranteed up to that useful life, regardless of fiber, regardless of weight, regardless of construction. So we always get pushback going, no, really, how long's it last? All the technologies, even the ones that people use simplified terms like inherent and treated. Treated, everybody kind of feels that there's some implication there that they will wash out. The FR treatments today are so sophisticated, and that bonding technology that's utilized in basically in that THP formula, they bond phosphorus and nitrogen together to give the FR properties. It is so secure on that cellulosic that it can't be hampered by washing. Now, there's a couple things you can do in the weeds to where if you did long-term chlorine and long-term peroxide, you may be weakening that. But that's really excessive. We have to get into 50 plus washings of that type of corrosive to affect the chemistry. So long-winded answer to say the good news is for all your reputable manufacturers today, there is no concern about the FR technology. So dovetail, where does the concern pop up? And I'll just make a general statement. You have to be cautious of where you're sourcing it. Think of the giant shopping center in the cloud. We all know where you go to shop in the cloud. You can go in there and put in FR shirts, and you'll see shirts all the way from $40 to $120. What's the difference? Well, nothing until you need it. There are certain rules of economies, certain economies of scale to where I know what fabric costs are, I know what labor costs are, I know what FR chemistry costs are. And if some of the largest companies doing this can only produce a shirt for $100, how can someone produce one for half that, $50? What did they remove in that $50 to make it viable to put on commercially? Well, something had to happen. The downside is with what we do, you don't know until the day you need it, because it's built to withstand short duration thermal exposures. Well, whatever that technology is has to have been compromised in some way to reduce that cost. So could you be more hurt based on looking for an economical solution as a piece of PPE? Absolutely. So we want to caution folks that yes, your North American reputable supply chain is pretty much solid. When you start getting outside of that service area, I would just be very cautious. And the easiest way to pick up a bad actor is look at price, because they are literally offering you something at sometimes half the cost with no accountability. Because at the end of the day, if I'm hurt, and it might be hurt to where if I was wearing good stuff, I have 10% body burn. I'm wearing this stuff, I have 30% body burn. Well, that 20%, who are you going to go hold accountable for? You've got little or no resolution to, once it gets from the distributor washes their hands once they sold it to you. So then getting to the manufacturer is near impossible. So I would just caution folks in that area.
Yeah. So just had a couple of thoughts come up there. So the first one was back to the washing, because that was something that I always heard, people would say like, oh, well, you can't wash it, or if you wash it wrong, they're no good anymore. So do people still need to pay attention to that at all, or is it pretty straightforward? Like, how's the washing work?
Really great question. And again, looking at today's commercially viable fabrics, the good news is we've made it very, very difficult for y'all to mess it up. Do some basic things. No chlorine. Well, most of these garments are colored. Who's going to use chlorine? Okay, who's going to use bleach? Be cautious of color-safe bleaches. Okay, so that's the one way it can sneak in. And then the other sneaky one is peroxide. Both chlorine and peroxide weaken fibers. Fibers are doing all the work. Your fiber makeup of this fabric is doing all the heavy lifting in that thermal event. So we don't want to weaken it. So avoid peroxide and chlorine. Where do you find peroxide? OxyClean. So what's your solution? Any old liquid detergent that has no additives. Wash it, dry it, hang it up, and keep using it, and it'll give you a long, faithful service life. Avoid fabric softener in both the dryer sheets and the liquid.
Yeah.
Why? They're petrochemical based. You're putting in something on there. It's going to mask the performance. The cool thing is if you accidentally do it, just rewash it. It's gone.
Mhm.
The big thing we have to watch is people who wear our stuff work in dirty, grimy, greasy, oily environment. Be cautious of secondary accelerants, both during the workday and during the cleaning cycle. You can dry clean them for heavy use. You can soak them for heavy use. You can use stain removers for heavy use. The biggest thing to check, and it's as simple as the old sniff test. When it comes out of the dryer, if it still smells like fuel, it's fuel. If you need to keep washing it until that odor is gone, once the odor is gone, it's clean and usable. And staining is not an indicator of FR properties being compromised. If I have a big stain there and there's no odor, perfectly fine. If I have a big stain during the workday and it's a secondary accelerant, get me out of the hazard.
Let me ask you something a bit more. I hear this one a lot, where the situation comes up a lot. Imagine, someone's wearing the arc-rated clothing, face shield. They got it all on properly, and say the clothing is rated 12 calories per centimeter squared or 12 ATPV, but they're in an arc flash that's 25 calories per centimeter squared. From your experience, maybe you've heard some stories, maybe you've seen some testing. What is going to happen to that person who's in that exposure? I can't tell for sure.
Right. And you're not off, because remember, to get that arc rating on that piece of equipment, even though if it's perfectly labeled within all the standards, that's still subject to two variables that the electrician typically can't control.
Mm-hmm.
One is distant. It's usually measured at 18 inches. So if my electrical worker has to get a little bit closer, he's going to have more incident energy exposure. How much? We don't know, because we don't give them 10 inches, 12 inches, 18 inches. We give them 18. So if I just lean in a little bit, I'm going to get more. Secondly, that calculation is based on closing time. 4 cycles, 6 cycles, 8 cycles, whatever the closing time is, generated your incident energy number. Well, if that piece of equipment hiccups for any reason, if I'm supposed to be closing at 4 and I don't close till 8, you will never know it with the naked eye. And you definitely won't be in it if you're in it and you won't recognize it, but that's going to be dramatically more incident energy. So the scenario you just described is not uncommon. Mm-hmm. You very rarely get the exact incident energy at the exact distance with the exact closing time in an arc flash. So the good news is wearing your arc-rated clothing, even if it's technically less than the presented incident energy, one thing happens is you will still self-extinguish. You will not ignite, continue to burn. Now, that fabric will begin to fail at some point. All fabrics do. They have an arc rating based on an EBT and an ATPV. ATPV tells you the fabric was still intact at 1.2 calories per centimeter squared. An EBT tells you it started to break open. All fabrics do both. We record what happens first. Now, that's a lengthy technical way to tell you your fabric will start to give way. Now, unless you are trapped on that and can't get away, you have already started to move away, so you're reducing the incident energy. Even though that fabric is now starting to expose, you've still not caught fire and continue to burn. The concern is obviously the cotton t-shirt underneath. Is there enough incident energy left over as I start to break open? Will I ignite that? And that's a different topic. I go, but to your end game, what you're asking, I'm still protected. I'm not on fire. I potentially could have more injury, more second degree burn than I would have if everything happened according to exact distance, exact incident energy, 5 calories of energy, 8 calories served perfectly. Got a little closer, lasted a little bit longer. I'm now at 18 to 20 calories of energy. I've started to break open. I am going to have a section of my torso potentially and or arm receive second-degree burns that may not have originally. The good thing is those second-degree burns will still heal up on their own. We've still mitigated catastrophic potential fatal injury. And at the end of the day, what we see is, yes, you will be hurt a little bit more. How much more, we don't categorically know. The arc rating clothing technically will still work, but it'll start to reach its failure point. All we can say in that typical thing, any arc rated clothing at any ATPV or E sub BT in front of incident energy is going to be a better result than if it wasn't. Now, I don't want to categorically say that, okay, let's go willy nilly and start, wearing 8 cals when that panel says 35. I want to still be wearing 8 cal when my panel says 7, and I just want to deal with those variables that I talked about, where I could take that 7 and I could push it to 18 or 20 based on distance and clothing time. I don't want to think that based on what I said, I can just wear my Cat 2 clothing in front of a Cat 4 panel. That's not where we want to talk about. We're just talking about getting more exposure than what was labeled based to those 2 variables influencing that incident energy.
That's good. And that's kind of the understanding I've always had. The question that I was thinking about was, I lost my train of thought. So there's got to be, from your, I know you're out there talking to different industries, and I was curious if you had one or two in mind that you feel are kind of leading culturally, and they're really bought into arc flash clothing and all that, and maybe they have been for a while. And then what are some industries that you feel are really lagging, and you're like, holy cow, you guys haven't figured that out yet? Like, what's your experience? What's some of the good and what's some of the not so good?
Yeah. The easy one, obviously, is look at our utility industry. You guys up north in Canada were even ahead of us down in the U.S. as far as adoption goes, if my recollection is correct. But when it finally came regulatory for us in 2014, because OSHA 1910-269 made that change, our utility industry, by far, no matter where you go, it's very, very rare, if not impossible in today's day and age, not to see a line worker in flame-resistant arc-rated clothing. Now, they may struggle a little bit in some of their power gen, and they may struggle a little bit in their substations as far as having the appropriate levels, and guys still resistant about getting into arc flash suits when they're in their substations doing that work. But the couple of industries you talked about, I don't know how you all are up in Canada, but the one down here that works side by side with our utility guys, look at tree trimmers and arborists. You have a storm, you've got to call in tree trimmers and arborists to get limbs off of power lines. We literally, here in the States, we have 1910-269 telling our line worker he needs to be in our rated clothing. We've got our arborist unqualified, and we've got our tree trimmer who's qualified, who technically could be in and out of that minimum approach distance, who it is a literally flip of a coin of whether or not they're in arc rated clothing to the levels they need to be, and or if at all. A lot of pushback there. The next one that we're seeing that's coming up that's a little off-putting is all the EV service folks and the new data center service folks. Now, I don't know where you are with all this AI stuff. I mean, we just had announcements that they're putting in 5 data centers up in the Pacific Northwest. All those data centers are nothing but power stations.
Yep.
And who's going to be servicing them? So we just had a big push here in November of last year. OSHA came out with a new guidance on basically focusing all those electrical workers who work in and around energized equipment, who should be following 70E and Z462, that are not. These are people who are relying on, we've locked it out, tagged it out, which by definition is energized work, but they're not wearing arc-rated clothing to do that. Then they're having poor lockout, tag out processes, and they're getting injured, and or they're not getting and wearing their PPE and doing energized work. So we still have a huge segment in that general industry area whether it's solar, whether it's data centers, or whether it is EV charging stations. We had probably 4 or 5 incidents just last year of folks clamping on to EV charging stations to servicing them that had arc flashes and heart flash injuries because they weren't wearing PPE. So we are still far, far away in that 70E Z462 category of outfitting all those electrical workers and making sure that they're wearing their, whether it's 8 cal, cat 2, however you want to label it, that everyday shirt and pants. So I have a baseline of protection for all my tasks. And remember, that category, energized tasks, are just diagnostic. Voltage testing, troubleshooting, and verifying for lack of voltage are all require arc-rated clothing for those tasks per the standards. And you know yourself, and just talking to the community, how many companies are underserviced, meaning that we have cot kits and we'll put it on when we need them. We know that happens all the time, and or we just are not using it.
Yeah, so just circling back here, because you mentioned tree trimmers, EV, data centers, and when the tree one was obvious. Those guys are probably not electrical workers. The data centers and the EV, are they hiring people who maybe don't have the experience in the electrical world, or the people that are running those businesses just, and obviously it's electrical, but they just don't see it the same way maybe as the heavy industry sees it? Is that kind of the problem, you think?
That's probably the best thought approach. It's that low voltage, low danger. And we know categorically some of the most 480 and under is equally as dangerous. We do know that your 120, 277, your light ballasts, and your other industrial voltages that are not on that side of the wall can equally cause arc flashes. And the problem is that those arc flashes then initiate a clothing ignition. You've taken something that could be relatively minor, and you have some equipment damage and some downtime to now you have an electrician in a burn unit with catastrophic body burn. So yes, the easy answer is those folks are either contracting out to the electrical experts, and the electrical experts are downplaying what the hazard is, and they're putting their folks or allowing their folks to work on energized equipment that has not been put in an electrical safe working condition because it's considered low voltage. There hasn't been proper lockout tagout procedures, and people are getting hurt. And that's the big motivator of that OSHA new guidance document of last year, was primarily for this emerging categories. They've seen and heard from the industry that whether it's emerging clean energy sources, whether that's solar, whether that's wind, whether that's water, whatever the case may be, and or the emergence of these huge data stations and these EV chargers, the stress on the grid and the stress to get more power. So the influx of new electrical workers and new contractors to fill this void is the expectations. It's going to be large. And that's not even talking about, do we have enough current grid to even satisfy these power requests? When you start looking at what AI and all these things are, these data centers just to power, that just for people to create little characters of themselves and sell dolls online. I don't know.
Create my own little world, I think. But so you mentioned that OSHA guidance document. Do you know what that's called? Do you know the name of that thing?
Yeah, it's literally, it's the OSHA guidance document. You can find it on the partnerships of electricalsafety.org. You can also go to OSHA.gov and look up latest OSHA guidance. You can Google latest OSHA guidance. There's, I think, almost every company directly and indirectly connected to arc-rated clothing has made a comment on it. We've got all the publications have made comments on it and have not had articles on it. So standard Google search OSHA guidance document will pull up many resources. And then if you want to go find the origin, The Partnership of Electrical Safety was a big lobbying movement. We were one of the founding members of it that went to Congress and got this all signed off on. Took us, I think, 2 to 5 years, if my recollection is correct, to make this happen. The downside is it's just that. It's a guidance document. It's not enforceable, but it does emphasize the importance that OSHA compliance officers, when they're out in the field, will be looking to companies that are you implementing the correct electrical safe work practices? Are you correctly utilizing the nationally recognized consensus standards? So that will help from an emphasis standpoint. Hopefully it'll drive some of the 50% of these companies that either are ignoring or choosing not to implement PPE for their electrical workers. And hopefully at the end of the day, it will save some folks from serious injuries, if not fatalities.
Yeah. No, that sounds pretty useful for everybody listening. I think that's a great maybe spot to close things down. Derek, thanks again for coming on the show. Did you have any closing words or thoughts, or maybe something else that you'd like to point people towards before we sign off?
Nothing more than just, again, platforms like this, and Jon, what you and your team are doing to get the word out. I'll just sum up with this. People always laugh, Derek, how'd you get into this? I have no idea. I can't get your career path, but some 25 years later, we're still doing this. And I honestly thought when 70E first came out, I'd have 4 or 5 years of educating the workforce on it. It would be all adopted, and Derek would have to go figure out something else to do. So the positive thing for me and my family is I've still got a career. The downside is I've still had a career, because that means we're still not doing all the things that we could be avoiding if we just follow. As silly as it sounds, if you follow 70E, if you follow Z462, if you follow 70B, if you actually just did the things in that we know we would mitigate so much of this. We'd eliminate a lot of it, and it would be readily adopted and available. But we've still got a way to go, unfortunately. We're doing better, having forums like this. We're doing better because when we're out at the safety conferences, and we'll be at ASSP next week, we'll have more of these types of sessions. I'd like to see, before I retire, I don't know if it'll happen, I'd like to stop having these sessions, because that means we've done it right, and there's no need for them. But that's probably my pie in the sky dream. But thank you again for the forum, and greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.